everyone, and welcome to Firstpost America. I'm Eric Hammond. We're in Washington, D.C., and over the next few minutes, we'll take you from the U.S. and around the world, covering all the top stories of the day. Before that, here's a look at the latest headlines. France's new prime minister quits after less than a month, saying conditions were not fulfilled to stay in office. His exit shook markets, with Paris stocks down nearly 2% and bond yields touching 3.6. Israeli and Hamas arrive in Egypt for ceasefire talks as President Donald Trump urges all sides to move fast to end the nearly two-year war. Russia reports power outages in 24 settlements and a refinery damage after one of Ukraine's largest drone attacks. Moscow says 251 drones were in fact down as Kyiv vows further strikes on Russian energy sites. And over 200 hikers remain stranded after an unusually heavy blizzard hit the eastern face of Mount Everest in Tibet, though many have been rescued over the weekend. And raising the spectacle meter, President Donald Trump says a UFC event will be held at the White House on his 80th birthday on June 14th of next year. We begin here in the United States, where tensions are simmering in Chicago after the Trump administration authorized the deployment of federal agents and the National Guard to the city. The White House on Sunday described Chicago as a war zone following a series of violent incidents and protests linked to recent federal operations. Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem defended the decision to deploy 300 members of the Illinois National Guard to the city. And speaking on Fox News, Noem criticized Chicago's Mayor Brandon Johnson, who's been opposed to federal intervention and ICE raids taking place throughout the city. Now, Noem said Johnson City is in fact a war zone and that he's lying so that criminals can go in and destroy people's lives.
It's wrong. There should be consequences for that and for leaders that stand up and knowingly lie about the situation on the ground. Johnson City is a war zone, and he's lying so that criminals can go in there and destroy people's lives.
The troop deployment order directs the National Guard to protect federal officers and federal property. Now, this follows earlier actions in Washington, D.C., where the president federalized the city's police as part of what he called a crackdown on crime. After Noem's comment, Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker accused the administration of worsening the situation instead of resolving it. He said the people in President Trump's administration are the ones who are in fact making Chicago a war zone and urged federal forces to leave the city.
They're the ones who are making it a war zone. They need to get out of Chicago. If they're not going to focus on the worst of the worst, which is what the president said they're going to do, they need to get the heck out.
In a separate statement on X, Pritzker said the administration's Department of War gave him an ultimatum to either call up state troops or face federal deployment. ICE operations have increased across several major U.S. cities, particularly in Democratic-led areas. Raids have involved armed agents and unmarked vehicles conducting operations in residential as well as in business districts. These actions have led to demonstrations in several states. In Chicago, protesters intensified over the weekend after the U.S. Border Patrol agents shot and injured a woman. The Department of Homeland Security said the woman, who's a U.S. citizen, was armed with a semi-automatic weapon and was accused in an intelligence bulletin of doxing federal agents online. The incident prompted large crowds in Chicago's Brighton Park area, where protesters demanded an investigation into the growing use of federal force.
A shooting earlier, an ICE-involved shooting. We want to demand an investigation. They are escalating violence. They are escalating violence in the city. This is not making anyone safer. These raids, you saw that the raids that just did a few days ago, they were innocent people. They have not shown the need to go and terrorize families in the middle of the night, zip-locking kids, getting people naked in the middle of the street. Is that public safety? Is this public safety ended up with a shooting? Some being chased and now wrecked in a few blocks away from here? This is not keeping nobody safe.
However, President Trump's deployment faced a legal setback in Portland after a Trump-appointed judge blocked the president from allowing troops into the city. Now, despite the ruling, the president said he intends to straighten the situation in Portland and Chicago, as he vowed to crack down on crime and illegal immigration.
We're going to look at that. It was amazing. Portland is burning to the ground. It's insurrectionists all over the place. It's Antifa. And yet the politicians who are petrified. Look, the politicians are happening. And you've seen it. The place is burning down and they pretend like there's nothing happening. So we'll take a look at the order. We haven't seen the order yet.
Now, amid the standoff, California Governor Gavin Newsom said that the National Guard troops from his state have also been deployed to Oregon without his consent, and that he plans to file a lawsuit challenging the move. And with new deployments underway and legal challenges mounting, the situation in Chicago and other U.S. cities remain fluid, raising questions about how the next phase of this federal crackdown will unfold. The U.S. has stepped up its military campaign against drug trafficking in the Caribbean, targeting vessels off the coast of Venezuela. On Sunday, President Donald Trump announced that another boat allegedly carrying illegal drugs had been struck, praising the Navy for its recent operations against what he called cartel terrorists. Speaking at the naval station in Norfolk beside the USS Harry S. Truman aircraft carrier, the president added that the U.S. would also begin focusing on drug trafficking by land as smugglers appear to be avoiding maritime routes.
In recent weeks, the Navy has supported our mission to blow the cartel terrorists the hell out of the water. You see that? And you know, there are no boats in the water anymore. We can't find any. We're having a hard time finding them.
Now, it's unclear whether President Trump was referring to Saturday's strike on the previously announced Friday operation. However, the Friday strike, confirmed by Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth, killed 4 people on a small boat allegedly carrying substantial amounts of narcotics. A Pentagon video showed a speedboat engulfed in smoke and flames following the attack. Hegseth himself described the individuals on board as narco-terrorists, but did not release any details on the type or quantity of drugs, nor evidence to support the claim. In fact, during a speech, President Trump told the sailors that the strike had been so effective that there are no boats left in that part of the Caribbean, noting even fishing vessels were avoiding the area.
Well, they're not coming in by sea anymore, so now we'll have to start looking about the land because they'll be forced to go by land. And let me tell you right now, that's not going to work out well for them either.
Now, since last month, U.S. officials say that at least 21 people have been killed in these strikes, which they claim are preventing drugs from reaching the United States. The White House cites the U.S. Constitution war powers, the designation of drug cartels as foreign terrorist organizations, and the right to self-defense as the legal basis for these operations.
The administration's position on Venezuela has not changed. We view the Maduro regime as illegitimate, and the president has clearly shown that he's willing to use any and all means necessary to stop the illegal trafficking of deadly drugs from the Venezuelan regime into the United States of America.
However, Democrats and legal experts have questioned the legality of lethal strikes against suspected traffickers in international waters without due process. Critics also argue that targeting individuals labeled as narco-terrorists bypasses law enforcement norms and may lack clear justification under international law.
As a Venezuelan, I feel real uncertainty about what could happen in the country and how it could affect not only me but all Venezuelan families. This would impact the economy, culture, and social life of the country. That's how I see things right now.
Venezuela, on the other hand, has strongly condemned the attacks. President Nicolas Maduro asserted that his country would defend itself against U.S. aggression. Even Venezuela's Interior Minister criticized the attacks, asking for evidence to prove the actual killings.
No one knows how much drugs there were on those boats that were attacked, if there were any drugs at all. They say that the last one had fentanyl. Here we have security agents. Has fentanyl ever been captured here in Venezuela? We know anything about the entrance of fentanyl to Venezuela? No, never. Imagine fentanyl in Venezuela, the end of the world. They are confusing some things.
So as the Trump administration signals the possibility of expanding military action to land routes, tensions in the Caribbean continue to rise, leaving the region closely watched by Venezuela and its allies. And the next phase of the campaign, whether at sea or on land, remains uncertain. And now to 2 shootings involving individuals of Indian origin. first to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, where a 51-year-old motel manager was killed at point-blank range on Friday. It began when the suspect shot a woman who was sitting inside her car outside the motel. Hearing the commotion, the motel manager stepped out to help. He tried to calm the gunman, but was followed by a single gunshot that killed the man instantly. This follows another incident last week where a dental student was shot dead while working at a gas station in Dallas, Texas. The student's death was condemned by the Consulate General of India, which said it's in touch with the victim's family and following up on the probe with local authorities. Our next report brings the details of these recent horrifying incidents.
In Pittsburgh, a chilling incident has unfolded. 51-year-old Rakesh Ehagaban, an Indian-origin motel manager, was shot dead last week. According to the police, Ehagaban saw the gunman and asked him, "Are you all right, bud?" Moments later, the gunman raised his weapon and fired. One shot point blank, straight to the head. Ehagaban collapsed on the spot. Police say that the accused, 37-year-old Stanley Eugene West, had earlier turned his gun on a woman nearby. According to authorities, West shot a woman sitting in her car, with a child in the back seat. The bullet struck her neck. The woman, severely injured but alive, managed to drive to a nearby auto shop for help. The child, miraculously, was unharmed. Hearing the commotion, Ehagaban rushed to the scene. It was at this moment when West walked to Ehagaban, raised his gun and shot him in the head. After attacking Ehagaban, the suspect walked to a U-Haul van, got in and drove off calmly as if nothing had happened. Police tracked him down to Pittsburgh's East Hills area later that night. West was eventually arrested and now faces multiple charges: criminal homicide, attempted homicide, and reckless endangerment. The murder of Rakesh Ehagaban has sparked grief across communities. But this tragedy isn't alone. Just hours before the Pittsburgh shooting, in Dallas, another Indian, 27-year-old Chandrashekar Pole, was shot dead while working at a gas station. Pole, who had moved from India's southern city of Hyderabad in 2023 for higher studies, had just completed his master's degree and was working part-time. His family in Hyderabad broke down, pleading with the Indian government to bring their son's body home.
He went to US in 2023 in June month. So he went for his masters to study there. So after 2 years of his completion of MS, so he just want to get a good job, for a full-time job. And meanwhile, he's doing a part-time job in a gas station. So suddenly today we got information that he had a shot dead with an unknown person at gas station. So we are requesting the government and the state government and the central government to send my brother to hometown, to India, and take an action against that person who had a shot dead.
The Indian consulate in Houston has confirmed it is working with U.S. authorities on the case. Both these incidents come a month after another Indian-origin motel manager in Texas was beheaded after an argument with a coworker. The suspect in that case, too, has been arrested and charged with capital murder. According to data from India's Ministry of External Affairs, 842 Indian students have died overseas since 2018. The U.S. tops the grim leaderboard with 141 student deaths. But the recent spike in violent deaths in the U.S. is now drawing urgent attention. As investigations continue in Pittsburgh and Dallas, the pattern is becoming painfully clear. These are stories of ambition ending in violence, of lives built abroad cut short in seconds.
And in the UK, just days after a deadly attack outside a synagogue in Manchester, police are now investigating a suspected arson at a mosque in East Sussex. The incident took place late Saturday night when two masked men tried to break into the mosque. They then poured gasoline over the entrance and a nearby car before setting them on fire. Two worshipers were inside at the time but managed to escape without injury. Police have since released images of the suspects and have increased patrols in the area. Here are more details on the event.
Following the deadly synagogue attack in Manchester on October the 2nd, where 2 worshippers were killed, Sussex police are now investigating a separate incident at a mosque in Peacehaven, East Sussex. Late on Saturday night, 2 masked men attempted to break into the mosque before setting fire to the entrance and a car outside. According to a voluntary mosque manager, the suspects arrived shortly before the fire and tried to force the door open. When they failed, they poured petrol on the steps, doorway and a vehicle, then ignited it. CCTV footage shows both men wearing balaclavas. One wore a black jacket with a pre-London logo, while the other had bright red gloves. Police have appealed to the public to help identify the suspects. Officials said the case is being investigated as arson with intent to endanger life, and additional patrols have been deployed at the mosque and other places of worship across Sussex.
This was an appalling and reckless attack which we know will have left many people feeling less safe. We are treating this as an arson with intent to endanger life and are continuing to pursue a number of lines of inquiry to identify those responsible.
The Peacehaven Mosque, which opened 4 years ago, typically hosts 10 to 15 worshippers for evening prayers, and it has faced hostility before. In August last year, eggs were thrown at the building on 2 occasions, and racial slurs were shouted at passers-by. The mosque attack comes just days after the Manchester synagogue incident, where 2 worshippers were stabbed and 3 others seriously injured. Police shot dead the attacker, 35-year-old Jihad al-Shami, a British citizen of Syrian descent. However, local residents reflected with sorrow on the deadly attack.
Just awful. It's really sad to see the effect it's having on everybody. It's not the country I want to live in. It's somewhere where people are being affected so awfully for just living their life. It's definitely not what anyone wants, and it's really sad to see.
In fact, during a rainy vigil for the victims of this synagogue attack, Deputy Prime Minister David Lammy also faced the protesters' wrath. While addressing the crowd gathered near the synagogue, he said, "We stand in defiance of those terrorists who seek to divide us." And just then, a heckler intervened and shouted, "Shame on you, you're embarrassing."
We stand in defiance of those terrorists who seek to divide us, who want to pit neighbour against neighbour, to weaken the bonds that bind us together as one nation, one people, one united kingdom.
Please, let the Deputy Prime Minister speak, please.
Shame on you!
That response honours those we have lost.
You're embarrassing!
May their memory be a blessing, not just to...
Clearly, both incidents have prompted widespread condemnation. Home Secretary Shabana Mahmood described the Peacehaven mosque fire as deeply concerning and urged unity across the nation. Prime Minister Keir Starmer, commenting on the Manchester attack, warned that hatred was once again on the rise.
That this is a country that stands up to hatred, and that we don't just provide refuge, we provide a home. For so many Jewish families, that is the story of Britain.
Local politicians spoke out as well. Liberal Democrat MP James McCleary called the mosque an important part of his constituency and described the fire as appalling. Chris Ward, Labour MP for Brighton, Kemptown and Peacehaven, called it disgusting. Faith and community leaders echoed these sentiments. Chair of Brighton and Hove Muslim Forum said no community, whether Jewish or Muslim, Christian or Hindu, should face violence at places of worship. Campaign group Brighton and Hove Stand Up for Racism highlighted recent alleged far-right activity in the region, including graffiti, flags and intimidation campaigns. Police confirmed that their investigation is ongoing and urged anyone with information about the suspects to come forward. The mosque now stands damaged, but not destroyed, but its congregation is shaken and clings to hope amid fears.
And finally, in Georgia, where tensions flared in the country's capital over the weekend as local elections sparked protests and deepened political divisions in the country. The ruling Georgian Dream Party claimed a sweeping victory, but opposition leaders and civil society groups called the results a sham and largely boycotted the vote. Georgia's prime minister accused the opposition of attempting to overthrow his government and promised a crackdown on dissent.
I want to remind everyone that no one will be left unpunished. We have more resources to identify the provocateurs than we had last year or the year before, so more people should be prepared to face the consequences.
The prime minister also pledged to completely neutralize foreign agents, suggesting that international actors, including European Union diplomats, were interfering by supporting the protest.
Last year, the EU ambassador openly interfered in our democratic elections, calling on voters to support the opposition. Let's not forget that the EU spokesperson also publicly supported the protests.
Meanwhile, prosecutors on Monday charged 5 opposition figures with attempting to overthrow the government and vowed that more arrests will come. On Saturday, tens of thousands marched in Tbilisi, waving Georgian and EU flags to protest what they call the government's repressive policies and its drift towards Moscow. Riot police used water cannons and pepper spray to disperse demonstrators near the presidential palace. And local media reported that 21 security personnel and 6 protesters were in fact injured in the confrontations. The Georgian leader said about 7,000 people took part in the protest, calling it the culmination of months of attempts to overthrow his government. He warned that no one would escape political or legal responsibility, framing the unrest as a deliberate challenge to the state rather than spontaneous demonstrations. Opposition leaders described the protest as a peaceful revolution aimed at restoring democratic values, and supporters blocked streets, lit fires, tried to breach the Parliament Palace, and confronted riot police despite strict laws and government crackdowns on media, NGOs, and civil society groups. The protesters urged the authorities to free political prisoners and continue Georgia's EU accession path.
We are here for freedom of our country, for Euro integration, because we're the member of the Europe family. We're here for freedom of our political prisoners, and we demand Georgian dream, so-called Georgian dream, to leave us alone and go to their homeland, Russia.
The European Union responded to claims of foreign interference, rejecting disinformation and calling for competitive elections. It also urged the release of those detained and encouraged all sides to maintain calm, restraint, and constructive dialogue. Protests and political unrest have rocked Georgia since Georgian Dream halted talks on joining the EU last November. Adding another layer to the crisis, the United States previously sanctioned the founder of the Georgia Dream and former Georgia Prime Minister for undermining the country's democratic and Euro-Atlantic trajectory in favor of Russian interest. As Georgia navigates these political challenges, it's unclear if the country can prevent further instability as the crisis continues to unfold. That's going to do it for us today. From all of us here at First Post America, we thank you all for tuning in. We hope to see you right back here again tomorrow. Thanks everyone for watching.